Okay, whatever, you can see my messes. That's fine. I'm a normal person. Oh, how do I look? Hi. Hello guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. I'm Ophelia, your host, and I have been missing for 7 months because life got crazy and my husband got laid off and I picked up another job and I decided to make nails like a business and all that stuff. So, unfortunately, I haven't had the time or wherewithal to sit down and film witchcraft videos. That being said, that doesn't mean that magic has not been a really integral part of my life. And I had the sneaking suspicion that I had, you know, some ideas for some magical videos, and lo and behold, a bunch of them came to me. The first one that I wanted to make, of course, in this long queue of videos that hopefully, you know, if I have time for them, I might film them all today, who knows, just so I can get a head start on everything. But I want to talk a little bit about my progression with magic over the course of a year. We've passed the year mark. I think my first comings to terms with magic was around 2020, because I remember I was having fallout with my mom, and that was when I think I was at the end of my wits, and I turned to a tarot deck, and I remember I was, you know, set to get married to my husband in that August and all that stuff. So it feels like a blink of an eye has passed, but I know it has been 2 years actually. So I want to talk about how my life as a witch has changed compared to how it was when I first started getting into magic. And really, I don't mean like getting into it, like dipping my toes into it. I really mean like dedicating myself to the craft itself. But that being said, like, we still evolve, we change as human beings. And this video is largely inspired by AnnMaddox's video, reacting to, you know, her development as a fully fledged witch and how maybe her teen self would react. Now, I wish I could react to, you know, a teen version of my witchy self, but I didn't have that longevity. What I do have is a few years under my belt, and so I wrote some notes down and I wanted to talk about them. If I am out of breath or sounding out of breath, it's because I am. I ran up some stairs to get here so I could film as quickly as possible, and I'm wearing a long knit shirt. I cannot turn the AC on, but I do want to get into it. So in terms of 2 years ago, what has changed in terms of my magic, my routine, basically my witchhood, right? Number one, and I'm going to just go in order, but I feel like maybe there's one that I want to talk about first. Okay, I didn't write this down, but this is the first thing that I want to say, which is I feel less tied to my identity as a witch, and not necessarily in the sense that like I feel less committed, but I feel like there's something about like that honeymoon phase where you fall into a new identity, and that becomes a very central focus of your life, just because it's novel, and it's almost like you've come to realize a part of yourself that you never knew before, right? And so it's fairly significant. It's like if you came out of the closet, or you were like newly married or newly engaged, or, you know, like a religious convert. It is such a significant portion of your life that obviously it makes sense to go around like with it as the foremost thing that you want to not just like think about, but also project to others. And yeah, I don't know, I guess I didn't write this down for whatever reason, but I remember thinking about it, which is that when I first got into witchcraft, I wanted to tell everyone, and this was obviously before I understood the witch's pyramid, and not that like I would tell people my spells or like what I was doing, but I really felt like it was so paradigm shifting to like have this religious trauma be unearthed, and to really do some shadow work, and to, you know, understand the power of the subconscious, or to understand like the workings of the universe, or at least to begin to grasp some of the workings of the universe instead of being like a leaf in the wind, right? When I first got into witchcraft, I wanted to tell my closest friends. I didn't want to tell my mom just because of, you know, the religious stuff that, you know, said religious trauma. But, you know, there were people that I really, really tried to not like justify myself to, but I just wanted to share my experiences just as like a new, you know, baby witch. I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to have a community. And I feel like without the internet, it's very hard to have those real life connections with people. And yet those are the people that you spend your days and nights with, right? You want them to know who you are. Nowadays, I feel like a lot more normal about it. Like, I feel like if you're a Christian or a Jew or, you know, whatever, people accept that part of you, but they're not necessarily like looking for your input on like how you're feeling, what you're doing in terms of like prayer, offerings, whatever. Like, they don't care. They don't want to hear it. And I'm starting to like understand and appreciate that level of disengagement, having a healthy level of disengagement with like sharing that information with others. Not necessarily in a bad way at all, but I do mean like I'm just more cognizant of what is polite in social circles nowadays. And it's not that I'm like repressing the desire to talk about my witchhood. It's just that like I just don't feel a need to talk about it. I just don't feel a need to talk about it. It is my thing. It is my spiritual source. It is what nourishes me. It's what makes me feel good. It's what makes me feel aligned and centered and gives me purpose. In the same way that anyone else with a strong religious or spiritual calling feels aligned and, divinely protected and led. It's all the same, I feel. That feeling of alignment, of spiritual soundness does not need to be verbally communicated to all your closest friends and family members for it to be legitimate. And that's why I feel like having this outlet and having my journals, all of that is very healthy for me as well. Okay, so I guess that was like a preamble. Number one that has changed is truly a belief in a disembodied intelligence or deities or doing deity work, not in a way of respect, but actually as having a physical repercussion in your life. I think, probably when you start something new, like you do it because that's what's prescribed and you want to honor the tradition. For example, like making offerings to spirits or the elementals, right? You do it because you hear it, and maybe at this point you cannot see the elementals, you cannot feel them, but you do it out of respect for the tradition, right? I think that's where I was a few years ago with disembodied deity and intelligences, and I was like, yeah, like that makes sense. And like I mentioned before, if you're not new here, I did mention before that I wasn't out looking for deity work at the time. It kind of presented itself to me. But I'm not talking about my patron deity. I'm talking about other things, right? So deity work, I guess we can talk about like evolutionarily high beings, but I also want to include in this point like archangels. And I never in my life, again, just with deity work, like working with a patron deity, it was not set in my sights. It wasn't like I went out and said like it'd be interesting to work with this kind of stuff, which a lot of witches do follow that path where they say, I think I'm ready to, work under, a spirit guide or whatever, right? For me, the archangel experience presented itself to me in such a visceral way. It was so visceral. I'm not going to get into what that feeling was like because it was almost like, I don't want to say textbook in nature, but it was very unmistakable. And when I looked into it, it seemed to be a very like common experience. So just to know, if anyone else has experience with archangels, I would love to hear it. And I do know that working with angels is not something that all witches like to do. But I can say that, like, without a doubt, I have had an experience that was so visceral and continued experience. It's not just like a one-time thing. It's a continued experience. I've built relationships with certain beings that I feel like I feel it in my bones. I feel it. I've lived it. It is no longer something I do out of respect for the culture, which I feel like is very important. Like you have to, well, I don't want to say you have to, but I will say I think there's a certain level of, like respect and courtesy that we give, like if you're visiting a temple or you're visiting like a mosque, you want to adhere to the cultural practices of said place, right, to be respectful. And I feel like I was doing that with witchcraft for a while. And now I feel like I'm in it. I believe that I understand the traditions. And not only that, because I have gone through the motions of being respectful, I feel like in turn, I have been given, I don't know, like I feel like I was allowed to experience a more deep level of that spiritual encasement, like really living the experience. And that has been an incredible journey for me. The next difference is that I've lost all my structure, but the difference is that it's very freeing in exchange. So the last time I've been here, I talked about how I would like log down all my ritual. I would have like a daily practice, and not that I don't have a daily practice, but it was very, very rigorous in the sense that like at this time every day I would do this thing, followed by that thing, followed by this thing, and it was always at my altar, and it was always with these tools, and I would always listen to this music, and I would always do things in this, that, and that order. And when the full moon came, I would do this, and when the waxing moon came, I would do this, and then when the waning moon happened, I would do these things in order, and I would always go to the store at this time to, and it wasn't because I was forced to, it wasn't prescriptive at all, it was just what worked for me at the time. Nowadays, just looking back at how prescriptive I was being, I have to say, like, I'm a lot less organized in general. Like, I am not writing down every single intuitive writing session that I have. Well, I guess I am because I'm writing, but like, if I'm just like, slinging some cards and I just want to get some insight, I'm not necessarily writing it down. I'm not necessarily running to my, my copy machine and printing out the cards and pasting them in a journal. I am not always getting like the proper notebook to write down my thoughts. Sometimes I scribble them in like a random notes thingy in my notes app, or sometimes, I've regressed to just one notebook, which one of the last videos I uploaded was my magical journaling practice. And sometimes I still go into my, words of affirmation journal to do some words of power, words of affirmation. Sometimes I, go into my tarot notebook and I write down some tarot stuff. But recently, since when did I start this practice? In May, I decided that my life was getting so chaotic, but magic was such an important part of my life that I didn't want to allow certain things to like stop, like logistically, I was just going through a lot in my life, but I didn't want my life to get in the way of my spirituality, which is ultimately what allows me to live life with zest, what allows me to, again, feel divinely aligned and led and all that stuff. So I went back to a one notebook system, and, you know, miraculously we aren't all the way through because I have just been taking things minimal. I have taken things off book, off script, and I love it. I feel really relaxed. Like, I don't feel a need to do a daily draw every single day. I don't feel a need to do like a full-on reading every full moon. I don't feel a need to do anything really prescriptive. The only thing that really is a daily commitment is my daily routine. My daily routine is still my daily routine. My daily routine has changed a little bit, and if I want to maybe talk about that in a different video, but definitely compared to 2 years ago, I think my former self would be a little appalled at how, you know, slipshod everything is. But I actually really appreciate the freedom it has opened up for me, because I think by not having such a vice grip on perfection and on archiving everything just so, it has allowed me to just experiment with magic and commit to doing it instead of archiving it. I feel like the act of doing and documenting if I have time versus like not doing. I mean, think about being like if you were like, imagine if you were a content creator and you felt like every single video you put out had to be perfect, and it went to the point where like you just like wouldn't live your life until you could create content around that thing, which I think a lot of content creators do experience. It's like, if I'm not going to make a worthwhile video of it, I might as well not even do it because it's not worth it. And I know that sounds really crazy to probably a lot of people, but if you're an artist or you're a creative, or, you know, you have some kind of commitment to pushing out a certain amount of stuff, I feel like it's a relatable feeling. Like, I started doing magic for me. I started doing spiritual work for me. I started doing purifications for me, and not writing it down. It's fine. It's all good. And I like that. The next thing is not being as reliant on tarot as I used to be. And this is part of like a me thing, and also part of another thing. I used to use tarot, I think, one, because I was so enamored by the language, you know, so many cards, so many readings, positions, interaction between cards. There is a lifetime's worth and then some of knowledge and symbolism, and just like so many things you can do within tarot and around tarot. And then like you can include elements and mystical Kabbalah and all these, you know, other pieces. And again, it is so much. It is so rich. And I feel like at first, not only was I just interested in learning the landscape and getting a lay of the land, I was also trying to make sense of my life. You know, I was going through some really intense stuff. And this ties into the next point a little bit. But I reached a point where I became very peaceful with the universe giving me what I need in life. Even amidst a lot of really difficult things and changes that have happened. And if you follow my other channels, or if you follow me in other ways or whatever, you'll know kind of what I mean by that. But what is really fascinating to me is how it seems like, although magic has taken me on this path that is at times very scary and very, there are very big changes happening, in a way, I know that I've asked for them, right? I've asked for certain things to be placed on my path so that way I can be in alignment with where I am. And I just don't feel a need to kind of check in all the time with tarot. I feel like tarot was a great way to plug into my subconscious, or to like, you know, get messages from my guides or whatever, and have a way to interpret them kind of like with some scaffolding. You know, I have an education background, so, you know, it'd be like with prompts or with sentence frames, something like that. You know, you're getting clues as to what you can pick out for yourself. And I feel like as I have started to attune myself more to messages from the universe or messages from my guides, I've not really needed explicit readings from myself on a daily basis to do that. I can do that messaging through other ways. And so, yeah, it's been fun. I've also started to get readings from others more often instead of doing my own readings. And I'm going to do a whole video, hopefully if I have the time, as to why a witch may want to get tarot readings. I mean, not just a witch, but like a tarot reader. Why would someone who can read tarot for themselves still choose to go for someone else to read for them? And if you are a witch or a reader yourself, you probably also do get readings from others. Or if not, I highly recommend it. There are a few very compelling reasons as to why. But yeah, basically letting tarot fall to the wayside a little bit. I don't want to say fall to the wayside, but like not having as active a role in a tarot routine every single day has definitely been a major shift for me as well. Not being as enamored by consumerism. Okay, that is a big one. So when I started my witchcraft journey, you guys know how it is. Witchcraft, it's like a spiritual path, but it's also a hobby, right? It's a lifestyle. And like any hobby / lifestyle change, you can get lots of gizmos and gadgets and fun things, especially with something as like erudite and scholarly as witchcraft. There's like a million books, a million potions, a million incenses, herbs, talismans, tools, you know, pieces of furniture, garments. Then you need to have like cloths and altar cloths and waxes and candles and lotions and potions and glasses and, you know, know, literally everything under the sun you could purchase, and I did, and I have a pretty sizable collection of stuff, and I think, you know, that was kind of necessary. I don't want to say necessary to the extent that I did it. I definitely tended to use a lot of my expendable income on witchcraft stuff because I was new to it and I was interested in like all the crystals and what have you, and I don't regret it. But I feel like I'm a lot less married to the consumerism of witchcraft now, which is fantastic. I'm very happy that I can look at a tarot deck and enjoy it and not want to buy it, or like see crystals that I don't own. That would be really great for my magical workings, but like I don't need the crystals. And you hear powerful witches or scholars or teachers in the craft, you know, talk about how you don't need those tools. And again, I wasn't buying them because I needed them. I was buying them because I wanted them. I wanted to align my identity as a witch to the things that I had in my house that were witchly. 2 years later, I am living the path of the witch. I am in alignment with my beliefs, and I don't need a crystal to remind me of that. I don't need to wear a pentacle around my neck to tell people that this is my belief system. I can just live it. I feel a lot more secure. Again, it comes down to, I don't want to say like aping the actions of someone who is a witch, but it just feels a lot more effortless nowadays to just be, without the tools, without the gizmos and gadgets. And again, I really don't want to phrase it as like a bad thing, or that like I'm holier than thou for like not being consumeristic anymore. It's just less novel to me. I think that's what it is. It's less novel to me. I feel less of a frenetic amazement by all the new stuff, right? I've seen it. I've been around the block at least a year or two. And, you know, unless something is very compelling, I'm not going to buy like every witch thing that I see, which I used to be that way for sure. I used to be that way. Number 5, I used to be not interested in high magic or ceremonial magic or any of the religious background, more of the like Western occultism stuff. And now I feel like there's way more compelling, and I don't want to say it's way more compelling. I want to say I have started to feel less intimidated by high magic, ceremonial magic, true ritual, like not true ritual in the sense, I just mean, how do I say it? Like, yeah, like ritualistic work, ceremonial work, you know, talismans and just really deep occult stuff. Like when you think of like magic, high magic, you know, they have, you know, astrological projections, and they make these talismans, and they write in different scripts, and, you know, there's chanting, and there's specific stuff that you have to do for purification, and it's a lot more intense and prescriptive. And also there's a higher belief in like God, right? There's less of that solitary pick and choose magic stuff. And I don't necessarily mean that, you know, all solitary work is bad or chaos magic is bad. It's just that I've developed more of an interest in some of the more religious teachings. And it's interesting. Again, coming into it, this was kind of my escape. It was my healing from religious trauma. And I am taking it very slowly in order to not kind of overwhelm my system or short circuit myself. But I do feel like there is a part of me that is very intrigued by the bigger picture of it all. So not just the magic and not just the doing of the magic, but also the understanding of how do these frameworks fit into our universe? Like, how does our universe actually function? What is it? And I just ponder often. I really, really get into a quiet meditative state. I go into my little egg. I call it my little egg. I sit in my little egg seat. I close my eyes. I shrink. I become so small, and then I become so big, and my consciousness just like really, really expands. And I just start to think. And I think on life, I ponder on life. I think about some of the more religious stuff. I think about things that are greater than I, things that I normally wouldn't really associate with witchcraft. Because I think witchcraft and magic, once you get into the pedantics of it all, they can occupy vastly different spaces, which I find just really, really interesting. But that being said, the other thing is I'm not as hung up on pedantics anymore. I just don't care about the terminology. And maybe that's like a me thing. But again, when I was first getting into witchcraft, and especially last year, in 2021, I was so voraciously reading everything I could get my hand on because, you know, I didn't know what this world was. I mean, the first year was really just like me throwing cards and like understanding tarot. The next year was me understanding the magical community. And now that I feel like I've read a lot about the magical community, not that I've like reached the end of it, but I feel like I have a very strong basis, an understanding of like certain things. Now I just feel like I'm ready to listen to myself. I'm ready to let my own inner guides, and not just like inner guide, you know, it's not just my inner guides. We are all connected. There's a Kabbalistic system. There is the Akashic records. There are higher beings that are out there to help us. There's just such a way for me to learn. And ultimately, words are just an expression of things that we know, right? Like words are just one vehicle to express or communicate something, but it will never be the perfect communication tool, right? Because words are just the best approximation we have of communicating our ideas to each other. And even that, like it's like when you have a discussion on racism, or you have a discussion on like a scientific experiment, and the first thing you have to do is explain your parameters, right? You have to define the words that you're using, how you're using them, what the confines of this conversation are. And I feel like, if you've ever done any academic work, like any academic studies, or you've written anything, they're very, very prescriptive about how they use their words. And, they don't want to mince their words or to kind of like have their words misinterpreted, because words are so fallible. And I feel like I finally understand why there's never going to be an agreement on the word pagan. There's never going to be an agreement on the word witch. Never are people going to really fully agree that like, hexing should or shouldn't be a thing, or like what is hexing. There's just so many ways that you can interpret something. And to get to the bottom of that conversation is ultimately, I think, not as fruitful as I think it's going to be. So I have just decided to stop being so pedantic with my words and start thinking about the principles of the things, to start thinking about the ideas themselves, the concepts themselves. What is the essence of what that word is trying to show me? So instead of digging into the nitty-gritty of the word, which like maybe in this context, this thing, but in a different context, it also includes like this stuff around it, or you talk to someone else who's, like using English as a second language, and their connotation is like this thing, and it's totally separate, right? Yeah, like I feel like, what are we talking about? What is the essence of the thing that we're talking about? Once I can identify that essence, it doesn't matter, what matter is it, like the color of the coat? What is the difference between the words when the idea is the same? So essentially, this is a long-winded way for me to say that I have stopped caring about very, very specific definitions of certain things. I've started to instead look at the actual essence or the seed of whatever the idea is, and really, really try my darndest to extract the meaning from the content instead of taking the content at face value. And what that also means is I have started to accept teachings from things outside of strictly witchcraft tradition. Because again, the way that things are worded sometimes are veiled in certain cultural or, specific practices, but that doesn't mean the essence itself is useless. So I've actually gone back to understanding some religious principles, or kind of breaking down certain texts and sermons and speeches from people who maybe I ordinarily would balk at because of their outer shell, the outer coat that they are wearing, so to speak. Like if they are giving a Christian sermon, I think normally I would be like, ooh, I don't agree with that because they have a patriarchal deity and all of this stuff that I don't agree with. But when I actually sit down and think about the nitty-gritty of it, what are they talking about? They're talking about the one creative force in the universe. They're talking about love and, perhaps certain principles of creation. I don't know, like there's a lot of Christian manifesting people here on YouTube. Whenever I do guided meditations, a lot of the stuff is like gratitude for God, and it's like Christian psalms for prayer. And I used to think that was very not gross, but I was like, oh, that's not what I'm doing. I'm a pagan. I'm a witch. We don't do, or at least like I'm not a Christian witch because I didn't grow up in a Christian household. But listen, now I listen to that stuff because I understand when they say God is good, God provides you blessings, God is taking care of you, God has a plan for you. That stuff moves me now because maybe my word for God and their word for God are not the same. But ultimately, what are we talking about? We're talking about the essence that has given us life. We're talking about life force, universe, prana, the goddess, the one creative force, infinite intelligence, like whatever word you want to veil it with. I have just started being okay with consuming content outside of like my little bubble, just because it doesn't say magic or like scripting or spell does not mean that I cannot take something useful from it. And again, there's something to be said about working within a system, and a magical system, and I, for one, still have my primary teachers that I listen to when I work under their system, but I have just started to understand that, we as human beings, we operate with words, and words are not necessarily the only or the best way to communicate our ideas. Whew, that was a long one. The other one is really understanding Hermetic principles. I think when I first started out in magic, again, I was just doing my own thing. I was trying to figure out the world. I wasn't able to really piece together. I guess I was trying to again, navigate like, what is this world? First of all, I need to start to develop a map. And once I developed my map, I realized that there are certain key things that are very, very pervasive in our understanding of occult theory. And I am happy that I'm starting to understand it more now. So I am now focusing a lot more on Hermetic principles. And understanding the laws of our universe. They are not like, they're metaphysical laws, okay? We'll say that. I'm not out here saying that like any of this stuff is proven by modern science, which, may or may not catch up to our understandings of metaphysics, but I have started to understand the law of metaphysics, the law of certain things, and incorporating them into my life in a more cognizant way. And it's not just like, oh, like I'm reading about this stuff and it makes sense in theory. I'm actually trying to incorporate my life or align my actions in such a way that these laws are acting in my favor. They're getting me to where I want to go, and where I want to go is not where my ego I wants to go, but where highest self me wants to go. And I like that. I think it's really fun and interesting. And, you know, I guess I didn't understand what the Kybalion was. I didn't understand like Aleister Crowley or any of these occult terms, you know, when I first got into it. If you want to talk about correspondences, the different sects of, you know, the pagan world. And I still don't understand all of it because there's so much history. And again, I am not in it in a communal sense. I'm just in it as like a singular person trying to make way of my spirituality. But yeah, I really think that I guess I'll put it this way, if tarot was the focus of 2020, then the Hermetic principles are the focus of 2022. I've really started to dig into the way that our universe functions and how things are, so that way I can go somewhere instead of just like spinning my wheels. I guess that is the best way I'm trying to get forward momentum. And by understanding how this whole thing works, how this whole reality of ours works, I can start to disentangle actions from just like throwing things to the wall and hoping something sticks. It starts to make a little bit more sense when you start to understand how and why things operate the way they do. The other thing is I love guided meditations. When I first started getting into magic, I felt like meditation, again, it was a holdover from my Buddhist childhood, but I felt like meditation had to be a certain way, and that certain way had to be very clean, precise, you do it yourself. It's like just you, silence. I just had all these misconceptions about meditation. I have a whole video on meditation misconceptions. Some of them are from my own personal, you know, experience. Some of them are not. But now I love guided meditations. I listen to them all day long. I do, you know, some silent meditation. I do some meditation just, you know, with music. I do a lot of guided meditation. In fact, I fall asleep to guided meditations, and I actually play them throughout the night. And now I feel like I love that feeling. I love the feeling of falling to sleep, knowing that my subconscious is working on something, knowing that I have trained my brain to do this, and then I kind of like drop into a different world, reality altogether. My reality when I'm sleeping is like a whole different story. I don't even know how to like explain it in words. I feel like you can't really explain it in words. The best approximation I have to it is like, if you've ever played Kingdom Hearts Dreamed Up Distance, that's like the only thing I can explain in terms of like how my reality and consensus reality here goes totally different in terms of like when I fall asleep. But that very, very sacred moment, that sacred, I don't know if it's like the thinning of the veil. It almost feels like when something has a gravitational pull and it just kind of like does this, right? It like sinks into something, it has mass. That's kind of how I feel when I am in my witch's trance. I'm falling asleep, I'm listening to a guided meditation, and I know I'm putting out pure, clean energy into the universe. It's either, you know, something purifying, either something strengthening, like I'm strengthening my aura, my energy body, that kind of thing, or I'm generating something, I'm communicating with a spirit guide, I am in the spirit world. Like there's something that I'm working on every single night, and I love it. I love it. I no longer feel like it's a crutch. And in fact, I feel like it is some of the most productive work of my day, of my daily life. And this is what I mean by my spiritual practice is very, very rich. And it's a daily occurrence for me. And I feel like I've maybe distilled my practice down to something very concise. Maybe that's why I feel like, you know, my routine is still very strong, even though I don't do as much of the like kerfuffling every single day. It just feels like, you know, why work harder when you can work smarter? Why force yourself into a witch's trance when you could just use the time when you are naturally in a witch's trance to do magic? So I do magic every single night right before I fall asleep, and every single morning when I wake up, and it has worked beautifully for me. I love it. It is gorgeous. The other thing is I am less reliant on my tools. Again, I used to work strictly at my altar, strictly at dusk, you know, like certain things. I had a routine, and still when I have the time at 8:30, I like to have a little bit of magic time, first with purification ritual, and then I go and I do my writing and my spell work and all that stuff and my meditation. I love that. I love that for me. I love that when I have the time, when I'm not as stressed out, or, you know, if I need to calm down or I'm feeling compelled to do it. But I just feel like I'm less reliant on tools unless I'm doing something. So unless I'm working within a particular framework of magic, like I'm doing a prosperity course or an angel magic course, or I am in the midst of doing a spell that takes multi-day, you know, workings. If I'm just like not doing anything active and it's more of like a maintenance kind of thing, or the spells that I am doing are more mental spells, or they require less realia, then I am happy to step away from my altar and to not use as many tools, or to, you know, to use whatever I have in me instead of around me, you know, whatever is within is enough. You know, as long as your brain is able to get to where it needs to go, without the tools, you don't need the tools. I feel like that's something that a lot of magicians will agree, that like you don't necessarily need tools. They just kind of, they can help. It's like, I don't know, flavors or something like in food. Like you don't need the flavors or seasonings in food. You know, it can add to something, it can add to a dish, but it's not necessary, you know, to get all the nutrition in. So yeah, I don't know if that's like a completely perfect analogy. What I am saying is that probably in 2 years ago when I was just starting to do spells or, you know, whatever, I was very trying to do things exactly the way other people were doing them, or doing things exactly the way I felt like they needed to be done. And now I understand that like just because something can be done a certain way doesn't mean it has to be done that way. Just because I can use anathema or I can use a wand doesn't mean I need the wand. I can do all the invocating, evocating, circle casting, whatever, just with my own mind. It is powerful, baby. It is powerful and I don't need it. Lastly, I don't do the Power Wish anymore, and that is simply because I am working on a course, and in that course we just don't do magic during the new moon or the full moon. We just take those two orbs off and we actually focus on the other parts of the moon, which is very interesting because a lot of magical systems say that the new moon and the full moon are the most powerful times to do magic. And yeah, I used to follow that. I used to do a lot of new moon and full moon ritual work, and just for a few months now I have been trying to do something different. And again, I don't know if this is going to be forever. I don't know if it's going to be a lifetime of me respecting that tradition, just because that's what, you know, my teacher at the time has said, and I am working within his framework at the moment. But yeah, that's just different. It's the last thing. It's definitely a change from what I was doing, which was mainly focusing the bulk of my magic around the new and the full moon cycles. Not necessarily the waning and the waxing, but the actual full moon and the new moon used to be like the most potent times for me to do magic. So yeah, that is everything. I'm really, really happy that I finally got all this out. I don't know whether I will actually edit and post it, but if I do, yay me, yay you. Thank you so much for being here. I am still so astounded that there are people who are out here watching my YouTube channel for magic. I am a little bit like a molting crab out here. I feel so vulnerable, and like people could pick me apart at any minute for my spiritual beliefs because they are so wacky and so bizarre. And I don't know, I feel like a lot of religious privilege or spiritual privilege is given to more orthodox religions or orthodox spiritualities. And, you know, when they say like, I believe in heaven or I believe in God, like no one looks at them sideways. But when you are a witch and you say you work with a patron deity, people look at you like you're crazy or that like spells are not real when prayers are real, right? It is very bizarre. It's a world that we live in that I'm trying to reconcile, but I want to be here for anyone who wants to be here with me. And so thank you so much for attending, I don't know, listening, being here, sharing your thoughts. I would love to know how much you've changed. And if you don't want to share, I do think that this exercise is so incredibly fruitful and meaningful in terms of seeing your own personal growth. I definitely didn't realize how quickly things have changed, or how quickly the shape of my magic, you know, has changed form or evolved. Just because when you do it on a daily basis, sometimes it's out of need or necessity or what have you, and you don't really choose to make a certain decision. You don't choose to believe in angels one day. You don't choose to do prayer a certain way, but maybe eventually a rhythm starts to form. You start to develop a cadence, and I feel like that's exactly how the shape of my ritual has you know, become what it is. I'm so excited to see where it is going to go in 2 years, 5 years, 20 years time, if I will still call myself a witch, if I will still be on this path, if I will still be a practitioner of the craft. I'm so excited to be old and gray and to see what happens there, because I just feel complete almost. I feel like there was something missing in my life for a long time, and my witchhood has really given me something so empowering, and I just feel so secure now in it. I don't feel as desperate for approval. I don't feel as like lost, you know, like I need to like feel my way around my surroundings. I just feel happy and content, and that there's so much more to learn, but there's no desperation in any of it. So I hope this was entertaining or educational or something informative, one of the 3 options, or many, many more. Again, I would love to hear your thoughts. I love you guys so much. Really, I am so grateful for your patience and your kind comments. You guys mean the world to me. Thank you for all of your patience during this time when I've been on a little hiatus, and I hope to be back semi-regularly very soon. Much love and light, many blessings, and I will see you on the next one. Blessed be.